Hi, this is Paul Gillen with this Midsize Insider podcast interview, and my guest today is Bill Blaney, who is a creative director, digital expert, and 25-year veteran marketing strategist. He's the president of Good Soup Marketing and lead marketing strategist for Canon Broadcast, projectors, and security products, also the founder of a website called hdcameraguide.com. So clearly a video and camera enthusiast, and he's got a new book, B2B A to Z, which I thought was particularly interesting because it's all about marketing tools and strategies that generate leads for B2B companies, and lead gen is where it's at, right, Bill?
That it is.
And
yes.
Welcome to the podcast. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm a big fan of yours, and I'm happy as heck to be here.
Oh,
Thanks.
geez, mutual admiration society. Huh? Well, let's start with you. Early on in the book, you present a number of myths about B2B marketing that I thought were interesting, and some of them are quite provocative. And the first one that caught my eye was the myth that customers don't want to be sold to. And, the new wisdom these days, particularly in social channels, is that no one has to listen to sales pitches anymore, and so sales pitches don't work. But it sounds like you're saying that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, I mean, not from my experience, at least with some of the clients that I have, and I'll tell you why. Bear in mind, I've been in the digital space and doing everything from social marketing for probably close to 10 years, if not a little more. So I'm a big proponent of anything that's digital, and I think social marketing works across the board. I think, however, that when it comes to certain clients within the B2B space, and this isn't necessarily some of your top tier Fortune 500s, but a lot of mid-level clients, depending on what the product or service is, there's an awful lot of them that have to do a lot of, for example, buying in bulk. And in that case, when one company is pitching to another, doing it purely over, through online sources and hoping that somebody's going to read through an article or maybe find your website through, some other measure isn't always going to work. I mean, sometimes with this, there has to be a traditional approach to it as well. And one of the points I make in the book is, for example, let's say that you are a company that buys pool pallets for shipping. Now, this isn't necessarily the type of company that may go online and find a company and read a few things and then put their money in and make that purchase. Sometimes with a company like that, when you're dealing with very large numbers in terms of money, you need to know a bit more. You need to maybe speak to that person. You're going to need to get case studies on this. A lot of times you need more of an involvement with them. In the case of someone like Canon, many of the purchases are made by, in the business space, which is more or less broadcast. A lot of those purchases are made through, big outfits like CNN or stadiums. And when they make a purchase on this level, they won't be buying one camera or one lens. They'll be buying hundreds of them. So in that case, there's an awful lot more that they need to know. And you need to have that direct connection with the company in that case. And sometimes it's a case of that company calling up. They have a whole sales division there. A lot of companies do. And they make direct calls, and that's where the bulk of their marketing, the bulk of their sales comes from. The marketing ends up helping. It ends up being a support, and when people go in, it's like, I know Canon, or I know Tiffin. And that helps in making the sale, but it's not necessarily what's going to drive them to make that sale, like it might be online.
Well, now, no question about that, but I wonder, has the internet changed the tone of sales pitches or the nature of interactions? Where, if you go back 15 years to the old trade magazine era, there was a lot of advertising was just hard sell advertising. Do you still think that works, or have the tactics changed?
No. I think with anything with B2B, I mean, here's the problem is, as you mentioned to me once before, that B2B isn't necessarily sexy marketing. I don't necessarily think it has to be sexy, but it can be clever, it can be interesting, and it certainly can be funny. No, I believe that a lot of the old ads where you just have a series of bullet points and maybe a photo of a product, no, I don't think in this market they're going to sell that. They're going to sell a product that well anymore. I think there has to be something more to it. So in that sense, I don't think that old part of marketing is working anymore. Online, I think the pitch has to be a little more direct. I mean, when you drive somebody to a page, certainly there has to be a very strong call to action to get them to take that next step and ask for information. Um, so you do need a little more information in that respect.
No, that certainly is traditional marketing, the call to action. You mentioned the bullet points, and that really relates to another section of your book where you talk about stale images and tactics that are used again and again in advertising. And you have an advertising background. I thought some of them were wonderful, like the light bulb or the tin can phones, which happened to have been on the cover of one of my own books, but nevertheless, it is a bit of a cliche.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite image cliches you've seen, and why don't they work anymore? Give us a few examples.
Sure, sure. I think the biggest one is ads that start off with introducing. You see this constantly. And look, you come out with a new product or service, you want to introduce it to a market. I think the problem with an introducing ad is that everybody uses it all the time. And when people see introducing, whether it's on a banner, whether it's on a website, or whether it's on an ad, their eyes sort of gloss over. It's not a new or clever way of messaging what you have. I think marketers need to come up with something that's a little more clever. Secondly, I mentioned celebrity advertising, but let me sort of preface that by saying I think celebrity advertising works. I think, however, sometimes some of the celebrities that are used, particularly in the B2B space, may be very, very old. You may find a celebrity and I'm not talking about, in terms of their age. I'm talking about when they were relevant in that space. If you have a product or service that's contemporary and you want to give it that air of being something that's new, sometimes using a celebrity that harkens back to the 1970s, even if they are within that space or they represent it somehow, doesn't always work. I think where it works well is when you use a retro celebrity, for example, for something like Priceline, where you're using William Shatner. I think in that case, you're putting an interesting twist on something, and then it will work.
Because he was an unexpected celebrity in that case, and you actually mentioned Shatner in the book, I know. How about someone like Tiger Woods? And we're talking about the pre-scandal Tiger Woods, who was an Accenture spokesman for a number of years. And of course, that's a B2B play. Did you think that was an effective campaign?
Yeah, I think once you get into the B2B space with celebrities like that who have a little bit of a history to them that may not be appealing, B2B companies tend to be the first ones to sort of pull out on that. I think consumer companies may find a way to put a twist on it. Usually you have to take a little time. But generally, a B2B company is a little more conservative in their marketing. And it's one of the reasons that I think something like that at Tiger Woods may be a problem up until it gets to a point where maybe a decade from now and he's sort of reintroduced himself in a different way. And then I think he can probably come back into that.
How about the role of customer endorsements, Bill? Certainly in the tech world, case studies and customer endorsements are a very important selling tool. Do you think they work?
Oh, I think they absolutely work. I use that nearly in every client that I have. It may not be the front end marketing that we do, but it's certainly on the websites. Sometimes, particularly with Canon in the past, we've used celebrity endorsements. I'm sorry, not celebrity endorsements, but case studies. There's loads of them. For some of my current clients, such as Tiffin, there's celebrity endorsements, including Latham, which is a company that sells pool products to dealers and dealerships. They need those celebrity endorsements in order to sell, in order to push it out and get leads. So yes, endorsements are absolutely crucial in the B2B space.
I want to go back to something we were talking about earlier, and the how well internet marketing works in the B2B space. And one thing that I hear a lot, particularly from the founder of a small company who's been doing it for 30 years, is I don't need the internet. I don't need internet advertising. I know who all my customers are. I don't need to find new customers. We're doing just fine. How valid do you think that argument is?
I think for some companies it may be valid today, and it may be valid next year. I think after that it's probably not going to be too valid. And I think the differentiation comes in here. If you have a certain demographic of some clients for these kind of companies. And in that case, some of these clients, the salespeople that they go directly to, are people that are maybe in their late 40s or 50s, who aren't using the internet so readily as a sales tool. They're people who are used to doing things the way that they were doing it before. Now, eventually, those folks will be out of the market, and then you will be dealing directly with people who are used to this, used to going directly on the web. However, despite that, I think most companies have to have a web presence, and it has to be a fairly robust web presence. And there's a lot more that you need to do today, as you know, in order to get yourself in a position on the web so that people will find you. And I think also, in addition to that, once again, as you mentioned, case studies, anything that relates to a company being sort of, at the top of their game. People are going to go onto the web. Even if they make a call to a company to find out more information, they're still going to go onto the web to check them and see what they read about them.
You devote a chapter of the book to social media marketing and some best practices, but you preface that by saying that B2B marketers as a whole are not very good at social media marketing. Why do you think that's the case?
I think they've just been the last ones to embrace it, really. To this day, I mean, I do a lot of social marketing, but most of it is for the consumer audience. Our B2B marketers, they sort of dabble in it, and I'll tell you where the B2B marketers have sort of been more aggressive with it. They've been more aggressive if, for example, they have a dealer base, and they also are pitching out to customers to drive leads. In that case, they use social marketing. They know they have to because really they're addressing the consumer and they're appealing to their business-to-business customer by saying, if you become a dealer for us, we will drive leads to you. However, there's an awful lot of companies out there that just simply do not have a consumer-facing component. And those ones are used to doing things a certain way, and social marketing has never been part of that. Now, I think certain marketing channels like LinkedIn, certainly, Twitter, have been proven over the last 4 or 5 years to be absolutes when it comes to B2B marketing. I think you get into a gray area when it comes to companies like Facebook and Tumblr and some of those. And I think it's left a bad taste in the mouth of some B2B companies who maybe tried this a couple of years ago in a very sort of haphazard way and didn't really have a plan for it. I think that's going to change, though, eventually.
Are there any companies, and not to put you on the spot here, but are there any companies that you think do an outstanding job of, B2B companies do an outstanding job of social media marketing?
Yeah. As I mentioned in the book, I think IBM does a terrific job, and one of the reasons they do is because they have all of their experts and a lot of their employees online actually blogging. When you're doing that, particularly for a company that big, you're driving an enormous amount of content into the web. Secondly, they also give their employees the ability to blog in a way that's appropriate for them, to pick subjects that are interesting to them. And I think one of the things that even you mentioned in social marketing to the business customer is the fact that a lot of companies tend to put the brakes on doing blogging and doing a lot of social marketing for fear that, they don't have complete approval of everything that goes out, for fear of what people might say in a comment area. And I think it's really more of an opportunity, as you mentioned, than it is something to be fearful of, because you can go and have that conversation with customers directly. And that's a little more handy.
You also make some points about traditional marketing. You clearly have not drunk the social Kool-Aid entirely. You believe that traditional marketing does have value and will have value long into the future. But certainly, we're seeing some kinds of traditional marketing are declining faster than others. Which traditional marketing tactics do you think have the most staying power?
Most staying power right now, I would certainly say, and I mean, this is mostly in the consumer space, commercials, because, generally when you're looking at commercials, you're looking at content marketing once it comes to the web. I think radio is still practical, once again, for consumer. Billboards, for anybody who's driven in and out of New York City or probably any big city at this point, you see a bunch of empty billboards. They're not as effective anymore. And I think advertising is also effective, even in the trade space. Even though a lot of the trade magazines have diminished, there are certain spaces and certain businesses where trade in magazines is still important. I recently got back from NAB, and I couldn't even tell you how many magazines were sitting at the front of this convention, an enormous convention for broadcast. And those magazines are still there. They're thinner, But I think one of the things that certain spaces where it's necessary for business to business companies is have a placement in there so they can say, I am a player. It may not be the most prominent space where they're going to get their audience, but they have to be there, at least for the short term.
Now, in the technology sector, Bill, we've seen an almost complete collapse of the trade magazine business. I mean, it wasn't, 10 years ago, a CIO would have typically 600 pages of magazines stuffed into his or her mailbox every morning, and today most of those magazines are gone. Does that present an opportunity for marketers to fill that void?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I think right now it's not really the Wild West anymore when it comes to the web. But there have been a lot of trade magazines that have gone online and haven't done as well. And I think what happens there is that it opens up an opportunity for a company within that space to be able to take control of particular searches. Now, one of the things that I talk about in the book is trying to do a site that maybe is not your company site, but is something that would be more properly called a category-focused website or a product-specific website. With a category-focused website, it's more of a wiki, more of a portal and a location. So, for example, let's say you sell steam boilers. Let's say you sell boilers, some form of boilers. Instead of trying to own a space for all the trade magazines, what you do is you look at that trade magazine, you see where they're positioned in terms of search, and you build yourself a portal, toward that. What it's going to do is that it can focus directly on a particular search word. Now, we developed a site called HD Camera Guide at a time where there were about 3 or 4 different trade publications which had just gone online. And what we did, we tried to make it as robust as we possibly could. If you looked at HD Camera Guide at the time that it was at sort of the top of its tier, along with some of the other trade pubs, you wouldn't be able to tell that this wasn't a big magazine or a big publication with 10 to 20 to 30 people behind it. It was really maybe about 4 of us that were building it, but we built it with the same idea of trying to get that market and ended up doing so.
Finally, I want to ask you about customer reviews, which certainly are very important in the consumer electronics space, in books, in travel. We're beginning to see some efforts to replicate that in B2B. For example, Amazon has a new supply chain oriented site that has customer reviews and is targeting business professionals. Do you think that peer reviews are going to have the kind of impact on B2B markets that they have had in some of these B2C markets?
Once again, I think they will for some. Right now, right now for the B2B space for certain areas, you have forums that people go onto which are very popular. I know that for steam engineering, there's a forum I think it's called ENG Tips, which receives enormous traffic. And that's really what it is. It's endorsements of different types of steam products for engineers, and in addition to discussions. So everybody that we know within that space goes to this website to learn a little more about how to install these products, as well as which products work well and which are the ones to pursue. So yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with customer endorsements anywhere, wherever they may be.
Thank you again, Bill, very much for spending some time with us today.